Welcome to Executive Leaders Radio, your spot in the corner office, the radio show where executives share their secrets to success. Executive Leaders Radio.
You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen, with my co-hosts, Jeff Mack, Newmark, Caleb Hoppus, Hanlon, Matthew Shapiro, Obermeyer, Kim Arnold, Meridian, and Mike Krupp at Trajectify. Jeff, can you give us a rundown on who we have on our show today, please?
Sure, Herb. Alicia Karr, president of Meyer. John Schwarz, president of Bryn Mawr Hospital. Chris Samaras is president of ConnectUs. And Marcelo Parravicini is president and CEO of Cygnus Educationl.
Let's get to know our first guest, Alicia Karr, president of Meyer. Alicia, what is Meyer? What are you guys doing?
Meyer is an architecture and interior design firm specializing in corporate and senior living design.
Where are you from originally? How many brothers and sisters? And where are you in the pecking order?
I am from Southwest Philadelphia in a small row home. I have an older brother.
And what was going on with you, 8 to 14 years old? What were you up to?
8 to 14, I was captaining my safety patrol. Mm-hmm. I was growing up in Southwest Philadelphia, Irish Catholic family, and the only person of color in my neighborhood.
You grew up with a single mom, grandparents were a major influence. Jeffrey, why don't you give me a hand?
So, Alicia, tell us about your mom. What was she doing when you were growing up, and what was her career like?
So my mom is a college dropout, dropped out at 19. She then went on to be a bank teller and worked her way up to being acting CIO of TD Bank.
So was it easy working her way up to TD Bank's ranks?
So no, my mother actually clawed her way up to the top of the ranks. And for me, as a young girl, watching my mother ascend the ranks of a traditionally male environment really inspired me as the leader that I am today.
And how does that help you build your team at Meyer?
It enables me to look at all of the different emotions that go on, looking at the different perspectives and the characteristics of my team.
Kim?
Tell me about the influence of your Irish Catholic grandparents.
So growing up in an Irish neighborhood, in fact, only with Irish grandparents, they really instilled in me that work ethic, but also that sense of community and heritage and making sure that you celebrate all the aspects of your life.
And how do you bring that into your current role with Meyer?
So within Meyer, it's about hard work. It's never going to be easy, right? And leading an organization, especially through crisis, is never an easy thing. But making sure that you put your nose to the grindstone and keep going, and incorporating and celebrating all of your teammates.
Matthew?
Yeah, can you tell me a little bit more about your mom? I'm fascinated by the passage from college dropout all the way up to acting CIO. Like, what was it like for you watching that?
So for me, watching her, she is an incredible source of inspiration for me. There's nothing better as a young girl to watch your mother become an executive, right? And really to embrace all of the aspects of bringing that into the office.
What lessons did you learn from watching her? What did you see her accomplishing?
Yeah, so by the way, you actually mentioned in the green room that your mother told you it was okay to cry.
I'm getting it.
All right.
So one of the aspects that she told me.
Yeah, good.
That it's okay to cry. It's okay to bring emotion into the workplace. And especially for me, I work in a creative industry, right? You must be able to embrace and harness the emotion. It's okay to cry, scream, vent, do whatever you need to do, but then get back out there and do the best job you can.
Mm-hmm. So tell me, how does crying help you in your position as the president of Meyer?
Well, crying, I think, is one of the emotions, right? It could be anger for people. And I think bringing passion, right, especially to the design world, is part of who we are as designers. It makes us people. It's bringing the empathy and the humanness into the corporate workplace.
Caleb?
So, Alicia, you were the leader of the safety patrol. What about team sports? What did you play growing up?
So I was a catcher on my high school softball team.
Tell us about the catcher on the team. What's their role?
So catcher, non-glamorous role, but leader of the team, main focus, keeping the pitcher's head in the game, directing the defense, also making sure that your team understands and knows, right? Getting into the psychology of the opposing team, talking with the umpires. It's a lot of communication going on.
So kind of like when you're dealing with employees and they're crying, screaming, yelling, did you ever have to deal with any pitchers on the mound like that?
Of course, when a pitcher is getting rocked by the opposing team, right? Taking the time to go out, have one-on-ones. I do that with my team now, right? You see someone struggling, take the time out, have the conversation, settle people down, and then put them back in the game.
And another one of your responsibilities, you said you kind of put people in place. Would you call the catcher kind of like the architect of the team?
Absolutely. The architect of the team, director, right? Shift this place, shift that. When one of the teammates is not performing or needs some assistance, you got to know when to pull people, put someone else in.
So I have to imagine that being the architect of the team, that has a direct correlation to your role at Meyer, right?
Exactly. When one of your teammates goes down, right, being able to put someone else in, being able to move and shift people from one team to another, one project to another.
Michael?
How much older was your brother than you?
He's 4 years older.
What was your relationship like growing up?
We were very close. We lived in a tiny row home in Southwest Philadelphia. We actually shared a room for several years.
How much your relationship with your brother today still strong?
We are. And I think he's been a really great influence for me. He has at least given me the perspective of being other within, but not being different.
Wait,
right?
what do you mean other, but not being? How were you other as a child? And how's that affected you nowadays?
So
How
for
were
both
you?
My brother and I, we are biracial. We grew up in a very white neighborhood. We were the only two people of color, but we never felt different, right? We had a very solid family structure, even though it wasn't the traditional structure. And that allowed us to at least, right? We knew we were not like, but we still were part of a community and still part of the family.
And how's that helping you build this business?
Well, I think it takes all different types of people to build a successful business, right? And bringing those different perspectives into the room and making sure that they are included and feel included in the conversation and what you're building as an organization, as a team, is critically important to success.
You mentioned that you were the captain of the safety patrol at the age of 13. Why did you want to do that? What's that tell us about you?
So the safety patrol, I went to school in Center City, Philadelphia, and we actually had to cross some very busy streets in order for students to get back and forth. So one, it was a sense of protection and protecting, but also of the leadership, right? It was one of the things that people aspired to be within our school. And it was a big honor, actually, for me to become captain of the safety patrol. My brother had also been. So
you aspired to be the head of the safety patrol. Mm-hmm. And that was a lot of responsibility at the age of 13, especially when you were feeling different. You know, you're one of the few kids that weren't white. And why? Tell us more about that. So what's interesting about that is, again, I was different, but I never felt out of place. I never had, and I think this comes from my mother, right? You always belong. It doesn't matter where you come from or what you look like. You always can belong, right? And you're always someone. Your mother told you this? My mother, absolutely. Uh-huh. So your mother let you know that you could do whatever you wanted to do, didn't she? Because she proved it to me. I watched her. She showed me how to do it. How's that show up? What's the benefit to your teammates knowing that your mother told you you could do whatever you wanted to do? What's the benefit to your teammates in knowing that? It's what I tell them every day. It's what I tell them when they have bad days, when they look and go, I can't do this anymore. The stress, the this, the that. And I go, if I can do it, you can do it. And I will help you. We can do it together. Your industry is filled with turnover, unfortunately. Is that the same thing in your organization, which is known as Meyer? Is there a lot of turnover in your business compared to the rest of the industry? There is, but I think we've done a good job of making sure that people understand that we're more than design. While design is important to us. Do you think one of the reasons that your people stick around is because of you, because your mom told you that you could do whatever you want, and your nature is to develop your people? And my nature is to make sure that we celebrate all of the differences and to make space for people who maybe don't fit into the traditional mold, but that you can have a place at Meyer. Yeah, you're making a place for people exactly. Based on who they are, as opposed to what they might look like. You're protecting them like you were at that safety patrol, weren't you? I am exactly doing that, yes. So you're basically the mother of Meyer, it sounds like to me. Some people would say that, yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. How does that make you feel?
It's one of the greatest honors. I never thought I would be leading a creative industry because I'm not a creative professional. But to be able to build a place where I know people feel secure and where they have a foundation is incredibly important to me.
What's the website address for Meyer?
MeyerDesignInc.com.
We've been speaking with Alicia Karr, president of Meyer, here on Executive Leaders Radio. Don't forget to visit our website. It's executiveleadersradio.com. That's executiveleadersradio.com to learn more about our executive leaders. We were just speaking with Alicia Karr, president of Meyer. Stick around. We'll be back in a moment, right after this quick break. Don't go anywhere. This is Herb Cohen, your host of Executive Leaders Radio. And if you're a business consultant, if you consult to business owners or to business owners' team members, then we'd like to speak with you because we're getting requests from people all over the country, from entrepreneurs all over the country that are starting and building their businesses where they're looking for help. And maybe we can help connect you. Why don't you email us at consult@executiveleadersradio.com. That's consult@executiveleadersradio.com. And perhaps we can connect you to folks, to entrepreneurs and their team members all around the country that are looking for help. That's consult@executiveleadersradio.com. We're back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen. I'd like to introduce John Schwarz, who is the president of Bryn Mawr Hospital. John, what is Bryn Mawr Hospital?
Hello. Bryn Mawr is a 130-year-old institution, 300-bed hospital, community teaching facility in the heart of Philadelphia's Main Line. We have about 15,000 inpatient discharges a year, 40,000 emergency department visits, about 1,800 births. It's a busy place.
Wow. Where are you from originally? How many brothers and sisters, and where are you in the pecking order?
I was actually born here at Bryn Mawr and grew up in the surrounding community. So in some respects, I'm right back at home. I grew up an only child until I was in college when my dad remarried and had two more children. So I grew up in a divorced household. My parents.
How young were you when your parents were divorced?
4 years old.
And who had custody of you?
My father did.
8 to 14. What kind of stuff were you doing as a kid, 8 to 14?
So it was an active lifestyle. I was out and about a lot in my neighborhood, playing sports out in the streets and out in the parks with a bunch of neighborhood kids. I was also a pretty strong student and was raised by my father, particularly to become a voracious reader. So I had sort of roles as a good athlete as a kid, yet a good student and sort of.
In your neighborhood, how many kids were in the neighborhood, and what was your role with the kids?
There were probably a dozen boys within a couple years my age, and so, like I said, we're out and about a lot, always playing sports. Being a good athlete, I always felt comfortable no matter the group I was in, but I did take a role where with some of the kids who, let's just say, weren't as good athletes and maybe were, getting teased or bullied, what have you, I was always the bridge builder. Hey, let's make sure we figure out a way to let so-and-so.
All right. So what's being this bridge builder when you're a kid have to do with your being the president of Bryn Mawr Hospital?
It's very similar. We have a lot of different stakeholders, a very diverse world in a hospital setting, various backgrounds, education levels, socioeconomic backgrounds, and agendas. And you got to find a way to facilitate and find common ground and alignment.
Jeffrey.
So, John, tell us about the environment growing up with weekends with mom and weekends with dad, and especially your exposure with your mom to the arts and humanities.
Yeah, it was a really interesting childhood when I look back on it. So, Dad would take me out on, bird watching trips, geology trips, travel. Mom was very different in a lot of respects. As an actress, she was sort of always bouncing around from job to job between acting gigs. And when she had rehearsals for plays, she was a Shakespeare actress. I would be wandering around the halls backstage, meeting other actors, meeting other people in the backgrounds, getting a sense as a child of what it is to sort of interact with strangers and develop relationships. And
well, what was the benefit of all that stuff? How's that helping you as president of Bryn Mawr Hospital?
You know, I think first and foremost, it helped me learn the tools of how to build relationships and how to get comfortable with people I don't know. Mm-hmm. I think secondly, I developed an appreciation for the innate goodness of people who took me in. A lot of times, as a son of only child of divorced parents, you're alone a lot, and you know, I did have a lot of people always looking out for me and helping me and keeping me comfortable.
Cool, Kim.
So you had a fairly non-traditional background back then with dad having custody. Tell me a little bit about the relationship you actually had with your mom and how that did translate going forward.
I mean, it was a loving relationship. My mom did everything she could to be as present in my life as possible. She, you know, and I learned a few things. I certainly picked up some amazing things from her. You know, she was a preparer, as unstructured as she may have been in some aspects of her life. When it came down to the crunch time to learn her lines for her next acting role, you know, it was amazing to watch her pour in the effort. And so I developed an appreciation for that preparation, hard work. And so, you know, you can be unstructured, but you can be highly prepared and incredibly good at what you do at the same time.
Matthew?
Could you tell me a little bit more about that juxtaposition between like what your dad was doing? Because there's some odd stuff there with his academic past, and then your mom was kind of like less structured as you've described it. Tell me a little bit more about how you dealt with that switch between them.
You know, it's a good word, and it was the reality. You know, in my household with my father, I wasn't allowed to watch TV other than the NBA and Masterpiece Theater on PBS, if you can imagine that. And then, you know, my mom, she let me watch TV. She was much more sort of free-flowing with how she parented me. And so I had this, you know, very structured, strict, but in a loving way, upbringing with my father, who really sort of pounded home the importance of doing my schoolwork and reading and broadening my mind, and a more free-flowing love life kind of pursuits with my mom. And you know, it was an interesting set of complementary exposures in it.
Mm-hmm. Caleb?
John, you mentioned being a pretty good athlete in the green room. You mentioned you were a baseball player. So youth baseball is kind of interesting. You have to constantly move through the levels, get to better and better teams. I'm wondering, when you move to these better teams, how did you integrate yourselves with them, and how did you kind of win the respect of your teammates?
Yeah, it's a challenge. Obviously, as you move teams, it's a whole new set of players. You have to demonstrate your value to the team. They need, you know, they've got to figure out, is this guy going to add value or not on the team? And, you know, at a young age, that presents, that's stress, and that's opportunity to work through it and to build accomplishments. And so I've always found value in that, and it translates to work we do today.
So now, John, you're the president of Bryn Mawr Hospital, but I understand that you've held multiple senior leadership positions throughout your career. How does that kind of relate, you know, winning respect with your new teammates and coworkers?
Yeah. So as you move around, whether jobs or roles, you're obviously going to meet a new team. You're going to take on a new team, and same thing. They're figuring you out while you're figuring them out. And so it's, how do we communicate, demonstrate our respective value to each other, and find ways to plug the folks who report up to you into their most useful roles. How do you put them in a position to succeed, to enable your organization to meet its goals?
Cool. Michael?
On the dichotomy of you know, growing up with these two eclectic parents and a mom who seems to be entrepreneurial, how does that bring into your leadership at Bryn Mawr?
So I think you know, it's funny. I learned the value of being on stage. I never wanted to be an actor, and I never wanted to be a college professor. But, you know, as a leader, you are always on stage with your staff. And so I took and learned a lot from my parents and their respective gifts and talents about how to both interact with people in big, large group settings, presentations to 200 people, board meetings, to staff team meetings, to a one-on-one setting. This job is all about communication and communicating in different venues, and they are both excellent communicators. And
perfect. Jeffrey?
So, John, being the president of a hospital, patients and families can really feel empathy in bedside manner. I'm just wondering if the influence of your grandmothers has contributed to that ability.
Yeah, my two grandmothers were very real and active presences in my life, and I certainly picked up a lot from them. Their maternal instincts perhaps filled in some gaps from when my mom wasn't present, and certainly appreciated that in my background as a child, and helped, I think, add to my overall empathetic sense as a leader.
Matthew?
John, you spent some time in England when you were a kid. What did you learn there that impacts your role as president of a hospital?
Well, both living in England and sort of using England as a launch pad to travel in other parts of Europe, I certainly at a very young age learned the appreciation for other cultures, other societies. The rules aren't the same in every place as they are here. And so understanding that today, when you're, again, working with people with different backgrounds, coming at you from a different place, I've learned very early in my career, I need to listen. I need to understand where people are coming from, and I need to find ways to find that middle ground.
John, what's the website address for Bryn Mawr Hospital?
mainlinehealth.org/Bryn Mawr.
We've been speaking with John Schwarz, president of Bryn Mawr Hospital, here on Executive Leaders Radio. Don't forget to visit our website. It's executiveleadersradio.com. That's executiveleadersradio.com to learn more about our executive leaders. Just spoke with John Schwarz, president of Bryn Mawr Hospital. Stick around. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in a moment right after this quick break. We're back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen, with my guest, Chris Samaras, president of ConnectUs. Chris, what is ConnectUs? What are you guys doing?
Yeah, at ConnectUs, we were passionate about making life and work easier by putting mobile technology in people's hands all over the world. We work hand in hand with Tier 1 carriers to deploy phones, tablets, and other connectivity devices. Just an example, during COVID, we supported nearly 400,000 school kids with devices for distant learning. We service healthcare, transportation, hospitality companies, among the verticals that we provide devices to.
Where are you from originally? How many brothers and sisters? Where are you in the pecking order?
Yeah, I grew up in Bucks County, PA. I have one other brother, 6 years younger than me.
And what were you doing 8 to 14 years old? What were you up to?
Yeah, so I actually became an entrepreneur at a young age. I grew up in a neighborhood that had a golf course at arm's reach, where I found out that golfers frequently lost golf balls. At age 8, I was able to turn that into a business, selling sodas and golf balls to the golfers. Started paper route at age 10, and by 12, circa 1995, I launched a website called Web Intellects, which was a search portal for general information, which is how I get into footing in technology. I always strive to learning new things. And by 14, I was probably working 3 jobs simultaneously. Outside of working, I was generally playing with friends in the neighborhood, seeking ventures, riding my bike, camping, spending time with my dad.
What did you do when you had those 2 or 3 jobs when you were 14 or 15? What did you do different than the other kids that had those jobs?
I just tried to do my best. Always working harder, trying to be better.
Did you also tell me that one of those positions there were no other kids? Why were you the only kid that did that job?
I was the youngest kid, and usually as the youngest, you're gonna have to prove yourself. You have to kind of set yourself apart from the rest of the crowd.
Kim?
Chris, in the green room, you said, as you're talking about these jobs, that you're always looking for a way to make money. What was the drive to make money at such a young age?
Yeah, I grew up in an area where kids around me had a lot of stuff. I wanted that stuff, so I had to work my butt off to get it.
Jeffrey.
So, Chris, you told us that you were raised by your father as an engineer and your mom was an entrepreneur. How are you a combination of the two?
Yeah, so I watched a lot of MacGyver growing up. I like to figure things out. That's where I get the engineering background from my dad. He has a sense of adventure. He was like camping. Whereas my mom, being an entrepreneur, she quit her job when my brother was born so that she could spend more time with us and raise us. And during that time, she came up with doing, craft shows or baking cakes to supply restaurants.
Did you help her with her? Did you help her with her businesses?
I did. I really had a passion for cooking at a young age.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds to me like you're the perfect combination of what your mom was doing and what your dad was doing, both entrepreneurial and engineering. Isn't that what you're doing nowadays?
I am. It's always about figuring out things to provide a solution to a customer. Mm-hmm. And you have to be a visionary and trying to figure out how to, see what's ahead before it's happening and get ahead of the curve.
Matthew?
Chris, why do you have a passion for cooking and food?
I love just kind of experimenting with new ingredients. I just love the basics of food in general, like, good wine, good things that come from the earth. It's great to just mix those ingredients together. You mix the same 4 ingredients and you can make pizza 100 different ways.
Are you generally a recipe guy, or do you make it up as you go along?
I generally make it up as I go along.
And what does making it up as you go along in the kitchen have to do with being the president of ConnectUs?
You figure it out as you go. With being at ConnectUs, it's a lot of that. Bringing structure behind a company and putting, figuring things out to bring a solution to market is there's a lot of correlation there between cooking and. It's a fun side of running. There's always a fun side of the running business.
Caleb?
Chris, you had mentioned some of the things that you did for fun, hanging out with friends. One of your neighbor's fathers taught you about computers. These both quickly became businesses of yours. So I want to ask, is it important for you to get enjoyment out of work?
It is. What really drives me day to day is seeing that the devices that I'm, deploying out into around the country, restaurants, when you go into a restaurant, you're using a tablet that we've provided, or a healthcare system when you go in the hospital and they're using an iPhone to scan a patient at bedside. That's what really drives me, is to know that we're digitally transforming the world around us to use technology that I'm actually putting in the hands of those customers.
Mm-hmm. Michael?
Chris, in the green room, we were talking about teams, and you mentioned that you played soccer. What position did you play?
Yeah, I was a midfielder.
What are some of the traits of a midfielder that made you a good one and that you take into your business today?
Yeah, so in a midfield position, you really had to connect the dots between the offense and defense. As a midfielder, the cliche way of saying it is that you serve as the visionary.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's that have to do with what you're doing nowadays?
So, I've been called a visionary. I just didn't self-title myself that. I'm the typical guy with, ADD. I'm always looking big picture. I'm always jumping from the next idea to the next, trying to, get the result. I'm extremely driving. Always trying to get a better result.
Matthew.
Yeah, so take me back, Chris. You're 8 years old, and the first product you bring to market, the first vision you have is delivering golf balls and sodas to the golfers, across the street or wherever that golf course. How did you see that? Like, what made you see that you could sell that stuff to those golfers when you're 8?
So, going into the golf shop and seeing a golf ball at $1 a piece, and correlating when riding my bike in the neighborhood and seeing that people are hitting golf balls into the woods, I don't know, it just clicked. I was like, if I I could probably sell these golf balls back to these guys. There's got to be hundreds of these golf balls. We were collecting sometimes 100 plus golf balls in a given day. And, people would drive up in their car and pick up hundreds of these things at a time. It just kind of naturally turned into, slightly fun, slightly business. I was there every day with one of my best friends in the neighborhood. We hung out and we're making money at the same time.
It's fascinating to me that you just said it was slightly fun, slightly business, because I was going to ask you what was more satisfying, selling the golf balls because you figured it out or making the money?
It's all about figuring it out. Nothing's really transactional for me, generally speaking. I don't look at, just making money to make money. It's more the game behind it and building the machine that can make the money. So the fun part is really the being able to figure out how to do that.
Mm-hmm. Caleb, give me a hand.
Yeah, so we had mentioned this thing about you being a visionary. That's seen around. And it seems like you're always getting ahead of the trends in business with the golf balls or the computers. I mean, really, can you pinpoint for us how young you were when you developed this visionary
I don't know. I guess at 8. It's Matthew just mentioned. I didn't really think of it that way. But I guess, these different ventures, you got to kind of get creative and you got to figure things out. I'd say that started pretty young for me.
So
Chris,
figuring things out. And then you just mentioned at the beginning of your interview about this excellent number of tablets that you deployed into the community classrooms and restaurants during COVID. How are you able to tie back all the way back with your first businesses to being a visionary and finding gaps in the market now?
That's a good question. As far as how far that goes back. So when I started doing the website side of things, like noticing technology was really going to be the future. 95 was really before the internet was really a big thing. I think Amazon launched right around that time, 94, 95. So nobody had any idea who that site was. And now looking back, everyone knows who Amazon is. Coming today, I'd love to be associated as a household name at some point, and just being able to build that machine out. That's where, I'm really trying to touch as many lives from a digital transformation standpoint as possible. And
Chris, what's the website address for ConnectUs, Chris?
Yeah, ConnectUs.com.
We've been speaking with Chris Samaras, president of ConnectUs, here on Executive Leaders Radio. Be back in a moment right after this quick break. This is Herb Cohen, your Executive Leaders Radio host. And the CEOs we've interviewed on this show are interested in helping you get your business started and helping you grow your business, whether you're aware of the issues or whether you want the CEOs to give you a hand identifying the issues in getting your business started and or in growing your business. Why don't you email us at consult@executiveleadersradio.com. That's consult@executiveleadersradio.com. Whether you're interested in having our CEOs speak with you regarding getting your business started or growing your business, send us an email at consult@executiveleadersradio.com, and we'll be sure to get back to you shortly with some help. We're back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen. I'd like to introduce Marcelo Parravicini, who is the president and CEO of Cygnus Education. Marcelo, what is Cygnus Education? What are you guys doing?
Cygnus is a marketing, technology, and enrollment management solutions provider for online universities.
And where are you from originally? How many brothers and sisters, and where are you in the pecking order?
I'm from Buenos Aires, Argentina. I'm the oldest of 3 siblings, younger brother and sister.
What was going on with you 8 to 14? What were you up to 8 to 14?
For the most part, normal kid, going to school, riding bicycles on the weekends, playing rugby, but also living in a rather complex family where we had both dysfunction and function. So it was an interesting growing up situation.
I got a question. This business that you're in, which is helping enrollment with universities and so on, why is that so important to you regarding your childhood?
childhood, the dysfunctional side of my childhood meant that I daydream about being able to take control, help my family. So I always wanted to build something, be in charge. Fast forward to me coming to this country, I was a non-traditional student. So what I do directly helps non-traditional students.
Do you have a college degree or a high school degree?
I do have a college degree today. I completed my undergraduate studies at the Wharton School.
So you grew up in an environment that was pretty dysfunctional. You always wanted that normalcy, which is really what you're creating with the enrollment function. Kim.
You talked a lot about being normal. Tell me what normal meant for you as a kid.
Normal, what it means to anybody else, right? You go to school, you play with your friends, you ride bicycles, you play sports, you have fun as best you can.
And where did you feel that lacked?
Mm-hmm. The dysfunctional side of the equation is where it kind of disrupts that, but it's not something you can really incorporate into what's normal or not.
You mentioned Marcelo, that when you were a kid that you had this dysfunctional stuff and that it matured you. What's that maturity have to do with how you're building this business?
Maturity is understanding people. When you are exposed to challenges, dysfunctional challenges, you learn that people have to deal with a broad range of challenges in their lives, and you become empathetic and in understanding to what other people may be dealing with.
Matthew?
Yeah. Marcelo, your grandmother played a huge role in your life. Tell me about her.
Incredibly strong, a backbone, a stern woman, the kind of woman that will tell you, get on your feet, get going. I told you, I fell off a horse once. She said to me, are you okay? Get back on it, period. No embracing, no poor Marcelo, just get back on it. So it's the kind of person that will tell you not to quit, to keep moving, to get back on it.
What's that have to do with who you are nowadays?
I don't quit.
Just wanted to make sure I understood, Caleb.
Yeah.
So, Marcelo, you were a rugby player, and you told us you played middle scrum. So in rugby, a tough sport, that's an even tougher position on the field. You're getting knocked down and beaten down a lot. How does your performance on the rugby field, how does that relate to business?
Business, it's all about team. Rugby is one of those sports that, it does not look at a single star like you would see in soccer, for example, right? Rugby is definitely a teamwork. You have to learn to collaborate. You have to learn to rely on others to achieve your goals.
Jeffrey?
So, Marcelo, you were telling us you were raised by a single mom and an even stronger grandmother.
Yes.
How does your wife, Cynthia, and your two daughters support you in your business today?
Very, very strong woman, very supportive, incredibly important to me because having two daughters, I understand the challenges that being raised by women, I understand the challenges that women face in the workplace and in life as general, living in a men's world, if you will. So being married to a strong woman that also understands that and the importance of raising strong daughters is critical to me.
What have you learned from your daughters?
That has anything to do about business?
No, it's good to understand that I don't know. I still have a lot to learn and that you can learn from absolutely everyone.
Michael?
Marcelo, how is growing up in Buenos Aires in the 70s affecting you today and in what you do?
Interesting, it was a sheltered reality in that we had a military dictatorship. So the streets were safe. That's one of the, I suppose, positives of having an authoritarian regime. But there was also a lot of economic challenges. So we have hyperinflation, so you get paid today and your money isn't worth as much tomorrow. And hyperinflation means you have to be nimble, you have to adjust, and you cannot panic. You have to learn how to navigate the system in such a way that you can survive. So when it comes to business, it's exactly that. Sometimes the margins are not there. You don't close the deal you were hoping to close. You have turnover, whatever. Don't panic. Look for the solution. Work in collaboration with your colleagues. It'll work itself out.
Question for you. You came to the United States from Argentina when you were 18. Why? And what was going on?
My mother, unfortunately, was the first woman to be diagnosed with HIV in the late 1980s. Died in 1988 at age 36. My brother and I came here to visit my father for a couple of weeks. He became 34 years. Next thing you know, I don't speak English. I haven't finished my high school diploma. I'm 24. I still don't have a high school diploma. Trying to figure out where to go from there, and here I am.
What do you mean here you are? What are you talking about?
somewhere on the line is that whole lesson, what I learned from my grandmother, what I learned about growing up is, you have a decision to make. You can just sit there, I'm mopping floors, I'm a waiter, I'm a bartender. I can do that and just be it. And that's fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But you have an option to make what you want to be, who you are. I went back to school. I went to school at nighttime, community college, nailed the grades, transferred to the University of Pennsylvania, got my bachelor's degree. And then I started the path on, I'm going to build my own business one day.
Why?
Because again, growing up, it was about, there is a day when I have to relieve, if you will, my mother, my grandmother, and help my family. And that's no longer on the plate, but ultimately that's the driving force behind everything I have done.
What was the driving force behind what you've done? Give me that again.
Yeah, as a kid, watching, my mother struggle, I daydream of the idea that one day I would take care of her. And it's no longer on the plate because she's not with us, but ultimately that has always been my driving force. To be in a position where no one else had to worry about lacking, not having, not being able to provide, because I will do it for them.
Isn't that what you're doing for the colleges and the kids that are signing up, helping everybody help themselves?
100%.
What do you mean?
Well, I see every single kid, every single adult, for whatever it's worth, that engages with one of the universities that I work with, that I help connect with one of those schools, is someone like me trying to figure out how to carve that path forward.
Just wanted to make sure I understood. Matthew, what was your question?
I was actually going to ask if it was random that it was non-traditional education and why it mattered to him to be helping build non-traditional education.
That's exactly right. I mean, I found myself being a non-traditional student, and there are a lot of incredibly talented people out there that lose sight of what they're able to accomplish because they're non-traditional students or because they're labeled non-traditional students. And to me, there's no such thing as traditional, non-traditional. It's about individuals. And if you can help individuals find their path, realize their full potential, that to me is a realization of what I wanted to do to begin with.
Give me that again, is what you wanted to do to begin with?
Realize my full potential. And if I can help someone else do it,
So you're healing yourself by helping others?
100%.
Tell me more about that.
Think about when you go through dysfunctional situations in life, the first thing that will happen to you, frankly, is you will be embraced by anger. Anger is not something you embrace. It embraces you. You have to find the strength to embrace it back and turn it into learning, into experiences that you can leverage in a positive way. And once you figure that out, you help other people do the same. And that in itself is a realization that how you have chosen to heal can add value to somebody else's life.
How'd you get so smart? Who taught you this?
Being a caregiver, yeah.
Was this a grandparent or a friend or who?
I find myself having to pull the plug a couple of times. Being a caregiver on deathbed is very I don't know how to explain it. I want to say insightful, but the word is not insightful. It kind of sheds light into what's important in life.
What's the website address of this organization known as Cygnus Education?
CygnusEducation.com.
How do you spell it?
CYGNUS.
Education.com. We've been speaking with Marcelo Parravicini, President and CEO of Cygnus Education. Jeffrey, can you give a rundown on who else we've had on the air today, please?
Wow, what a great show. We had Alicia Karr, President of Meyer, John Schwarz, President of Bryn Mawr Hospital, Chris Samaras, President of ConnectUs, and just now Marcelo Parravicini, President and CEO of Cygnus Education.
I'd like to thank my co-hosts, including Mr. Jeff Mack, Newmark, Caleb Hoppus Hanlon, Matthew Shapiro Obermeyer, Kim Arnold, Meridian Bank, and Mike Krupp at Trajectify for giving me a hand structure in the questions, hopefully providing our listening audience both an educational and entertaining show. I'd like to thank our listening audience for listening. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a radio show. Again, our guests were Bryn Mawr Hospital, Meyer, ConnectUs, and Cygnus Education today. Our website address, executiveleadersradio.com. That's executiveleadersradio.com to learn more about our executive leaders. Thank you for joining us today. Please have a nice day. Bye-bye.